The diner fell silent as Lisa stepped between the massive Hell's Angel and two aggressive officers, her waitress uniform stark against his leather vest. "This ends now," she said firmly, just as the sheriff's cruiser pulled up outside. The officers' hands hovered near their weapons. The biker remained perfectly still, and Lisa, a waitress who'd never sought trouble, suddenly found herself at the center of a confrontation that would change everything in Pinewood. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from and what you think will happen next. And if you want more stories that touch the light within your heart, like this video, subscribe and turn on that notification bell. Welcome to In the Heartlight. Let's begin. The Blue Ridge Diner had been Lisa Parker's workplace for 15 years. At 38, the lines around her eyes told the story of long shifts, late nights, and the quiet struggle of raising a son alone in a town where opportunity came as rarely as rain in August. The breakfast rush had just ended, and Lisa was refilling coffee mugs for the remaining customers when Tom Jenkins from the hardware store caught her eye. "How's Jason doing with those college applications?" he asked as she topped off his cup. Lisa's face brightened at the mention of her son. "Finished 3 this weekend. If his SAT scores hold up, there might be scholarship money." "Smart kid," Tom nodded. "Takes after his mama." Lisa smiled but didn't correct him. Jason's intelligence came from his father, the only good thing that man had left behind when he'd abandoned them 10 years ago. She'd made peace with that history, mostly. What Tom didn't mention, what most locals knew not to mention, was how much Jason also resembled his grandfather. James Parker had been Pinewood's most decorated veteran, a man whose quiet dignity had commanded respect throughout the county until his passing 5 years ago. Lisa instinctively touched the dog tags she wore beneath her uniform, her father's tags that she'd kept close to her heart since the day the cancer finally took him. 5 years ago, those final months had been brutal. Her father, once so strong and self-sufficient, had withered before her eyes. She'd moved back to Pinewood to care for him, bringing 10-year-old Jason along, abandoning a promising restaurant management career in Louisville. But she'd never regretted it. Not once. Those final conversations in the pre-dawn hours when pain kept him awake, his stories about Vietnam finally emerging after decades of silence, had given her a glimpse of the man behind the stoic exterior she'd known all her life. "You've got his stubbornness," her mother used to say before she passed, and Lisa had never been sure if it was a compliment. Now, as a single mother working double shifts to put her son through college, she understood it was the highest praise. That unrelenting Parker determination had kept her going when nothing else could. While she's lost in thought about her father's last moment, the bell above the door suddenly chimes, drawing her attention. A large man entered, his imposing frame filling the doorway momentarily before he moved toward a corner booth. Everything about him screamed outsider in their small town, from the weathered leather vest emblazoned with the Hell's Angels insignia to the gray beard that reached his chest. Tattoos covered his arms, and various patches and pins decorated his vest. Despite his intimidating appearance, he moved with the careful dignity of age. Lisa guessed he was in his early 70s despite his still powerful build. The diner quieted as he took his seat, the usual morning chatter giving way to whispers and sidelong glances. Lisa observed him for a moment, noticing the way he positioned himself to see both the door and the room, the slight stiffness in his movements, the watchful eyes that missed nothing. Military, she thought instantly. Her father had carried himself the same way until the day he died. "I'll be right with you," she called, her voice deliberately normal in the uncomfortable silence. She grabbed a menu and a coffee pot, approaching his table with the same friendly efficiency she offered all her customers. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please," he said, his voice surprisingly soft and well-spoken. "Just passing through. Heard this place makes a decent breakfast." "Best in 3 counties," Lisa replied, filling his cup. I'm Lisa. Holler if you need anything." He nodded, a hint of appreciation in his eyes at her unfazed demeanor. "Ray," he offered simply. Lisa had just delivered Ray's order of eggs, bacon, and pancakes when the diner's door opened again. Officers Malone and Pearson stepped in, scanning the room before their gaze locked on the biker. Lisa felt her shoulders tense. In the year since they'd joined Pinewood's small police force, the two officers had developed a reputation for overzealousness, particularly with outsiders. "Well, well," Officer Malone said loudly as they approached Ray's table. "Don't often see your kind in here." Ray looked up calmly, setting down his fork. "Just having breakfast, officer." "That so?" Officer Pearson leaned against the booth, deliberately invading Ray's space. "Got ID on you?" Without comment, Ray reached slowly into his back pocket and produced his wallet, sliding his driver's license toward the officers. "Raymond Blackwood," Malone read aloud, making no move to return the ID. "Long way from home, aren't you? What brings a Hell's Angel to our quiet town?" "Personal business," Ray answered evenly. "Nothing that concerns your department." Lisa watched the interaction from behind the counter, an uncomfortable feeling growing in her stomach. There was no legal cause for the questioning. Ray had done nothing but order breakfast. But the officers continued. "Personal business, huh?" Pearson smirked. "Around here, we like to know what kind of business bikers have in our town, especially ones wearing certain affiliations." "I've broken no laws," Ray said, his voice still calm but firmer. "I'd like to finish my meal in peace." "Maybe we should take a look at your bike," Malone suggested. "Make sure everything's up to code. Bet we'd find something interesting." The diner had gone completely silent, other patrons staring into their coffee cups or plates, unwilling to look directly at the confrontation. Lisa felt a familiar burn of indignation rising in her chest. The scene triggered memories she'd tried to forget. Her ex-husband coming home with stories of putting people in their place, his badge a shield for behavior that had eventually driven her away. When Pearson put his hand on Ray's shoulder, something in Lisa snapped. She set down the coffee pot and stepped forward. "Is there a problem, officers?" she asked, positioning herself at the edge of the table. Malone glanced at her with annoyance. "Police business, Lisa. Nothing for you to worry about." "Seems to me this gentleman is just trying to have breakfast," she continued, her heart hammering, but her voice steady. "Has he done something wrong?" "Stay out of this," Pearson warned, his tone hardening. "Unless you want trouble. Trouble would be harassing a paying customer without cause." Lisa replied, years of carefully suppressed anger giving her courage. "Which is what this looks like to everyone here." Ray remained perfectly still, watching the interaction with careful eyes. "Ma'am, I appreciate it, but there's no need to involve yourself." "She's already involved herself," Malone said, turning his attention to Lisa. "How well do you know this man, Lisa? You vouching for a Hell's Angel now?" Lisa straightened her spine. "I know he came in alone, ordered politely, and hasn't caused any trouble. That's more than I can say for some who come through that door." A few diners shifted uncomfortably. Tom Jenkins caught her eye from across the room, giving her a small nod of support. "You might want to consider who you're defending," Pearson said, his voice low and threatening. "These bikers bring nothing but drugs and trouble. Is that what you want in Pinewood? Around your son?" The mention of Jason cut deep, but Lisa held her ground. "What I want is for all my customers to be treated with respect until they give us reason to do otherwise. That's how things work in this town, or at least how they used to." "Things change," Malone replied coldly. "Maybe it's time you learned that." "And maybe," Lisa countered, reaching for the diner phone, "it's time I called Sheriff Matthews. I'm sure he'd be interested in how you're conducting yourselves this morning." The officers exchanged glances, their confidence wavering slightly. Sheriff Matthews was a 20-year veteran, respected throughout the county, and notably less impressed with Malone and Pearson than they were with themselves. "Go ahead," Malone challenged, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. We're just doing our job, keeping the town safe. Lisa dialed, maintaining eye contact with the officers as she waited for an answer. Morning, Carol, she said to the dispatcher. It's Lisa from the diner. We've got a situation here I think Sheriff Matthews should know about. Officers Malone and Pearson are giving one of my customers a hard time without apparent cause. As she spoke, Pearson stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. You're making a mistake, Lisa. This town has a way of remembering who its friends are. The threat hung in the air between them, but Lisa didn't flinch. In her years since divorcing a cop, she'd learned that some types of officers counted on intimidation to maintain their power. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Thank you, Carol, she finished, hanging up. Sheriff Matthews is on his way over. Ray Blackwood sat watching the confrontation with an unreadable expression, though Lisa thought she caught a flicker of respect in his eyes. The officers retreated slightly, but remained standing near his table, clearly unwilling to abandon their intimidation entirely. The next 5 minutes stretched in uncomfortable silence. Lisa busied herself with refilling coffee cups, aware of the officers' glares following her movements. When the bell above the door chimed again, the collective relief in the diner was palpable. Sheriff Jacob Matthews entered, his weathered face set in professional neutrality as he surveyed the scene. At 55, he carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who'd earned his position through consistency and fair dealing rather than bluster. Morning, everyone, he said, nodding to the room before focusing on his officers. Malone, Pearson, what's the situation here? Malone straightened. Just checking on a suspicious individual, Sheriff. Hell's Angel, unknown in town, wouldn't fully explain his business here. The sheriff turned to Ray, studying him carefully. Mr. Blackwood, Ray supplied. Raymond Blackwood. A look of recognition flashed in the sheriff's eyes, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. I see. And what seems to be the problem this morning, Mr. Blackwood? Ray gestured to his half-eaten breakfast. Just stopped for a meal, Sheriff. Your officer seemed concerned about my presence. He was evasive about his business in Pinewood, Pearson added quickly. Was he breaking any laws? The sheriff asked pointedly. Not yet, Malone muttered. But these biker types. Sheriff Matthews held up a hand, cutting him off. Lisa, he turned to her, you called this in. What did you see? Lisa was conscious of every eye in the diner on her. She took a deep breath. Mr. Blackwood came in, ordered breakfast, and was eating quietly when officers Malone and Pearson approached him. They demanded identification without cause and began questioning him aggressively. When he maintained he'd done nothing wrong, they threatened to search his motorcycle. That true? The sheriff asked his officers. We were conducting a routine inquiry, Pearson defended. Given his affiliations, it seemed prudent. His affiliations, Lisa interrupted, unable to contain herself. Not his actions. The sheriff's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened. Last I checked, he said carefully, we police behavior in this county, not appearance or association. He turned to Ray. Mr. Blackwood, if you don't mind my asking, what does bring you to Pinewood? Ray considered the sheriff for a moment before reaching into his vest pocket. He pulled out a worn photograph and a small box, setting them on the table. James Parker, he said simply. I served with him in Vietnam. Today would have been his birthday. The name hit Lisa like a physical blow. James Parker. Her father. I come every year, Ray continued, looking directly at Lisa now. Usually just visit the cemetery, then move on. James saved my life outside Khe Sanh in '72. Never got the chance to thank him properly before he passed. Lisa stared at the photograph, a group of young soldiers, arms around each other's shoulders, her father's familiar smile in the center. Beside him stood a younger version of the man now sitting in her diner. You knew my father? She whispered. Ray nodded slowly. You're James's daughter? I should have seen it. You have his eyes. He opened the small box, revealing a Purple Heart medal. This was his. The paperwork got lost in the system. Took me years to get it approved and awarded posthumously. I bring it every year, leave it at his grave, then take it back. Seemed wrong for it to sit in a box somewhere when it belongs with him. The diner remained absolutely silent. Sheriff Matthews cleared his throat, turning to his officers with a hardened expression. "Malone, Pearson, I'd like to speak with you outside, now." As the officers followed the sheriff out, Lisa sank into the booth across from Ray, her fingers reaching tentatively for the photograph. "He never talked much about Vietnam." "Most of us didn't," Ray replied quietly. "Too hard to explain to people who weren't there. But your father, he was the best of us. Medic, saved more lives than just mine." Lisa studied the photograph, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. He had this picture, she realized, in his study. "I never knew who any of the men were." "We were the lucky seventh," Ray said, a smile softening his weathered face. "That's what we called ourselves. 7 of us made it out of an ambush when the rest of our unit didn't. Your father patched us up, kept us moving through jungle for 3 days until extraction could reach us." Outside, through the diner window, Lisa could see Sheriff Matthews speaking intently to his officers. Malone looked defiant, but Pearson seemed increasingly uncomfortable. "Why the hell's Angels?" Lisa asked, turning back to Ray. "After serving?" Ray's expression grew distant. "When we came home, nobody wanted to hear about Vietnam. No parades, no welcome, just silence or, worse, anger. The VA was a nightmare. Men like me, we drifted. The club gave us brotherhood again. Structure. Purpose." He shrugged. "Not all chapters are the same. Mine focuses on veteran outreach. We raise money for PTSD programs, visit VA hospitals. I'm actually headed to a charity event in Louisville tomorrow." The diner door opened again as Sheriff Matthews re-entered alone. He approached their table, his expression softer now. "Mr. Blackwood, my apologies for the inconvenience you've experienced this morning. Officers Malone and Pearson are returning to the station. We'll be having a departmental review of appropriate community engagement procedures." Ray nodded in acknowledgement. "No permanent harm done, Sheriff." Matthews turned to Lisa. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Lisa. It takes courage to stand up, even when it's uncomfortable." As the sheriff prepared to leave, Tom Jenkins approached from his table. "Sheriff, I think you should know we all saw what happened here today." He gestured around the diner, where other patrons were nodding in agreement. "Lisa was right to call you. Those officers were out of line." "I appreciate that, Tom," the sheriff replied. "I'll make sure it's noted in my report." After the sheriff departed, the diner gradually returned to its normal atmosphere. Lisa brought Ray a fresh cup of coffee on the house. "I'm sorry about how you were treated," she said. "That's not who we are in Pinewood. At least, it's not who we should be." "I've faced worse," Ray said with a slight smile. "Usually don't have anyone step up like you did, though. Your father would have been proud." Lisa glanced out the window, where her son Jason would soon be walking past on his way home from school. "My boy never got to meet his grandfather. I've tried to keep his memory alive, tell Jason stories, but—" "I have more stories," Ray offered, "if you'd like to hear them sometime." Lisa found herself smiling despite the emotional whirlwind of the morning. "I think we both would." 3 months later, the Blue Ridge Diner looked different on the last Sunday of each month. Motorcycles lined the parking lot, not just Hell's Angels, but veterans from various clubs and no affiliations at all. They came for what had become known as Parker's Memorial Breakfast, named in honor of James Parker. Lisa moved between tables, coffee pot in hand, greeting the riders by name now. Her son Jason worked alongside her, listening eagerly to stories from men and women who'd served across generations. In the corner booth, now unofficially reserved, Ray Blackwood held court, the photograph of the Lucky Seventh propped on the table. Sheriff Matthews made a point of stopping by each month, often bringing newer officers with him for what he called community integration training. Officers Malone and Pearson had been reassigned to different counties following a departmental review. "Another round of pancakes for the Vietnam table, Mom," Jason said, passing Lisa with a loaded tray. She nodded, watching her son navigate the busy diner with confidence. The events of that day had changed him too, shown him that standing up for what's right matters, even when it's difficult. Especially then. The bell above the door chimed, and Lisa looked up to see Tom Jenkins enter. He smiled, pointing outside where a new sign was being installed above the diner. The owner had agreed to Lisa's suggestion just last week. Blue Ridge Diner was now officially Parker's place. What had begun as a simple act of decency, a waitress defending a customer from harassment, had transformed into something larger. It had revealed connections hidden beneath the surface of their small town, bridged generations, and reminded everyone in Pinewood that judgment comes too easily, while understanding requires courage. As Lisa refilled Ray's coffee cup, he tilted his head toward the window where the new sign gleamed in the morning sun. James would have been embarrassed by all this attention, he said with a gruff laugh. Probably, Lisa agreed, but he also would have loved seeing everyone together like this. Ray nodded, his weathered hand briefly covering hers on the table. A gesture of understanding between two people connected by a man neither had fully known in life, but whose legacy they were now building together. Outside, more motorcycles rumbled into town, and Lisa Parker, no longer just a simple waitress, but a woman who had rediscovered her voice and her purpose, prepared to welcome them all. Love this story? Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more. Don't forget to check out the video currently on your screen. You won't want to miss it. See you in the next one.